All right, Flagstaff and streamers. Thanks for tuning in to the Eclectic Mix with Steve on Radio Sunnyside, KSZN LP 101.5 in Flagstaff, and streaming at radiosunnyside.org. And I get to interview Jake Allen, who's going to be at the Coconino Center for the Arts.
Yeah, the tour is called Guitar Dreams, which I think is a really fitting title for Ryan and I because we're both fingerstyle guitar players, but we do have this kind of ethereal element to our playing, and we were discussing names for a long time, and we landed on that, and now it's become this kind of brand for the tour that I'm tailoring my set list to it to make it coherent with such a cool title, actually.
Well, the stuff I've heard, I mean, you definitely get that title pretty well with your playing. And I haven't listened to much of Ryan's stuff, but looking forward to hearing. How did you guys get connected?
So Ryan and I used to be, I used to be in a band called the Accidentals out of Northern Michigan,
Yeah.
which I've actually played Coconino with them before.
Oh,
And we were touring heavily in 2017. That band is notorious for touring. I think one year they did 250 dates in a year.
wait.
Yeah, they were absolute workhorses, and they still tour. But anyhow, we were doing a festival. I believe it was the Kerrville Folk Festival in Texas,
Hmm.
and I was able to see Ryan's band, Ryan Hood, on the same bill as us, and was immediately taken aback by Ryan's guitar playing, his
Yeah.
songwriting. I mean, both him and Cameron, they're great songwriters.
Uh-huh.
But I thought I noticed there was a lot of parallels between Ryan's playing and the kind of fingerstyle stuff that I'm geared towards doing. So we met back then, and then since then, we've run into each other on the road here and there, and it's a pretty small, tight knit world in the music community,
Yeah.
and I would say him and Cameron are, they're people that I see on the same circuits as
Sure.
me and some of my other, musical peers quite a bit. So we've just kept in touch over the years, and finally decided that it would be kind of a smart idea to come together and do some shows. We're also both endorsees of Takamine guitars. So
Yeah.
I do clinics for Takamine. It's a great, acoustic electric guitar company out of Japan that
Oh, yeah.
are kind of, the workhorses of the acoustic electric world.
Right.
So him and Cameron were able to connect with Takamine as well a few years back. So we've also had some run-ins based on both being Takamine rips, and
Sure.
so yeah, it was kind of just this culmination of a long history of running into each other, and then finally saying, "Hey, let's actually hang out for a minute
That's
and
awesome.
go on the road and do some shows together."
Great. So how's the tour going?
Well, we haven't started yet. We actually start on
Oh, okay.
Friday is our first show down here in Scottsdale, where I'm currently at. We're doing the ASU Kerr Center down here, which seems to be a
Nice.
really cool little vibey theater.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Saturday we'll be heading up to Flagstaff to do Coconino, and
Hmm.
then we have a Tucson date, and then following that we have three shows in Michigan, where I'm from.
So I see you grew up in your dad's studio. Like, is that how you really
Yeah.
got? Tell me about that. It's really cool. I love that.
Basically, my entire family was musical growing up. My dad kind of being the cornerstone of that. He's been a performer his whole life. He
Yeah.
used to have a progressive rock band called Bondar and Wise, and it was similar to like something like Emerson, Lake and Palmer on steroids. Like very progressive psychedelic rock. And he played B3 organ and kicked
Oh,
bass
sweet.
pedals and had this huge ARP 2600 synthesizer on stage with him. And
I
so that was
remember
kind of
those.
his beginnings. And then, through the years, he grew up in Detroit and then moved up to Northern
Okay.
Michigan and ended up having a family, which included me. And
Yeah.
he had a studio in the house. And I always admired the kind of the art of working in the studio and working with sequencers and synthesizers and
Yeah.
drum machines and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. So I would go in there as a kid, probably starting around 6 or 7 years old, and make
Awesome.
my own little magnum opuses in his
Mm-hmm.
studio, and it was something that was really just started out for fun, and then eventually the studio became a job, and I started taking on clients when I was about 15 years old as an engineer
Oh,
and a
sweet.
co-producer. So it became a little bit more of an official thing that I was doing, and
Right.
it was around that time that I decided that I wanted to pursue music as a career, mainly because the therapeutic benefits that I started realizing came out of it at that formidable time in one's life, those teenage years. I was like, oh, I can like solve all of my social awkwardness by writing songs, and anything that's a problem can be alchemized into a piece of art, and I thought that was really cool, and it's something that kind of stuck with me for up until this day.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty healthy way of dealing with emotions and things that we go through, as opposed to many other things that we can do to kind of self-medicate. So that's great.
Exactly. It is it's a serious blessing, and anybody who has some kind of artistic outlet is going to be way ahead of the game in many senses, from you know uh, a sense of working things out that otherwise, like you said, you might turn
Right.
to something a little more destructive. This is more of a productive way
Especially,
of dealing with life.
especially when you're 15, right? Back in the day, learning that stuff. So
Right,
great.
and especially growing up in a town where nothing's happening. I grew up in a town of 1,500 people,
That's true.
and it was you would either hunt, fish, snowmobile, or
Yeah.
get into lots of trouble. And I got into a little bit of trouble, but I also was mainly focused on making songs and trying to do something creative with my time.
So your
Yeah.
production is top notch, man. I've been listening to a lot of your stuff, and you just have a great ear for that. So what bands and musicians have really you've kind of focused in on that you've learned a lot, or maybe it's just from your dad. I don't know, telling you how to run the knobs.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to bands that I particularly listen to, I like I said, my dad was a progressive musician, so
Yeah,
he raised me on bands like Yes
of course.
and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and
Yeah,
Genesis. And then when I turned about 12 or 13, I started having a rebellious phase where I was listening to heavier music like Nine Inch Nails and
yeah,
Deftones,
right.
Slipknot, all of these kind of like
Yeah.
new metal bands.
So my
So
kids
that
listen
was
to.
my sort of yeah, my sort of beginnings was in that, and of course my dad freaked out when I turned my back to all that scholarly music and I was listening to all
Oh,
this heavy stuff.
yeah.
He was like, "What are you doing?" But it's interesting because there's different aspects of both of those kind of musics that worked its way into what I do. But I think probably I'm a very fingerstyle guitar focused musician, and I
Yeah.
think one of the big turning points was learning about an artist named Andy McKee, and then ultimately learning about an artist named Michael Hedges,
Ah,
who if you know Michael Hedges, he was a an absolute pioneer in acoustic guitar back in the 1980s. So when I was probably 15, 16, I started getting more into that world. And then yeah, then I became a studio rat full on, and I just started really thinking about production and ways to make my records kind of speak louder, and being a multi-instrumentalist, I'm able to kind of do all of the things in the studio that I would like to hear on any given record,
yeah.
aside from I don't bow and I don't blow.
Okay,
So I
that
don't
makes
play
sense.
anything. I don't play any strings, and I don't play any reeded instruments or flutes or anything. But I have enough of an arsenal to where I was able to put all the tools together to make these kind of lush sounding productions. And yeah, just like any of us in the music world, it's a bug that you kind of get that. you keep going down this rabbit hole, and you
Hmm.
keep striving for more, and in a production sense and an engineering sense. It's just a never ending feat to try to get to the next level of making a good record.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing is sounding great. So keep that up. Now,
Well,
how
thank you, Steve.
about, yeah, man. So how about, and I'm glad you said Michael Hedges, right? Because he's the guy, right? And Hedges is just amazing, and more people need to hear about him. But what you're doing is a good kind of way to continue his music and then change it and make it your own. But that guy was just unbelievable. I saw him once, many years ago, and I had the opportunity to see him a bunch of times in Chicago and missed out before his accident. But yeah,
Mm.
he's a was a special guy, special guy.
Absolutely. I have a funny Michael Hedges story that I sometimes tell on stage. I was, too young to have met him, but so I on my very first tour when I was probably 19 years old, I was quickly learning of about how it was very difficult to make money on the road, especially
Right.
your first time as a
Yeah.
touring musician. And
Yeah.
so I started busking. I would go out on the street
Okay.
and open up my guitar case and play for tips. And I was doing that in San Francisco in Fisherman's Wharf,
Whoa.
and there's thousands of people walking by. It's a really busy place, and some people would stop and listen, and
Right.
throw a couple bucks in my case, and but for the most part, it was people were just kind of passing by. But there was this one woman who stopped, and I was playing this particular piece of music that was kind of inspired by Michael Hedges,
Okay.
and for the listeners out there, Michael, for those of you who don't know, Michael passed away much too early in life, in his mid 30s, or late 30s. But he really left this mark on the acoustic music world.
Mhm.
And so, anyways, this one woman stops, and she is staring into my soul, like giving me this like death glare almost. And I'm just like, what? Why
Whoa.
is this woman looking at me like this?
That's
And
bizarre.
and I finish playing this song, and she walks up to me and she says, "Hey, where did you learn how to play guitar like that?" And I told her, well, I've learned from watching great fingerstyle players like Andy McKee, and of course the great Michael Hedges. And she said, Michael was my brother.
Oh my
And
God. What?
it ended up being Carol Hedges, Michael's sister, out of thousands of people walking by who just happened to be there at that moment.
I got
And of
goosebumps,
course I
man.
was I was
Whoa.
just blown away, and we shared a chat, and I thought, man, what a cool moment that was. And she walked away, and I figured I would never see her again. But just as a little fun back end of that story, a couple years after that, I was here in Scottsdale, and Andy McKee, who has since become a friend of mine, he was playing at a place called the Musical Instrument Museum here, a great
Oh yeah.
venue that I've had the honor of playing myself several times. So, anyways, him and I went out to dinner after the show, and this guy comes in and sits down with us at our table, and I don't know who this guy is. He's obviously a friend of Andy's. And Andy introduces me, and he says, Jake, I want you to meet a friend of mine. This is Craig Hedges, Michael Hedges' brother. and and I was like, oh man, do I have a story for this guy? And I started to tell him. I said, Craig, you're not going to believe this, but a couple years ago, I was playing guitar on the streets in San Francisco, and your sister walked up to me, and he stopped me right there in my story, and he said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! You're that guy.
Oh my
I
God.
have to get a photo of you, and I have to send it to Carol because she's not going to believe I'm meeting you right now."
Unbelievable.
So I have
Man.
this funny serendipitous relationship with Michael's siblings. And Craig and I are still friends today, and he lives here in the valley. And I see him. I will probably see him on Friday, I would imagine. And so it's just kind of a cool way to kind of have a connection to Michael in a direct degree of separation kind of way.
Man, that just blew my mind. That is so cool. He's always been really close to my heart. So that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
So let's jump into a little bit of songwriting. So, what's your process? How do you take those
Well, it
ideas?
it it all depends. I'm a really tactile fingerstyle guitar player, meaning I really like finding riffs that feel good under my fingers,
Yeah.
and things that are kind of stimulating to play, but also sound melodically rich and
Hmm.
and pleasing to my ear. So it usually starts with the guitar. It's usually I'll be sitting on my couch just kind of tooling around with different tunings and different finger style techniques, and hopefully stumble upon something.
Right.
And then once that happens, if I'm lucky, sometimes it'll come with a vocal melody.
Okay.
And if the idea doesn't come with a vocal melody, then it becomes a different thing of having to chip away and work at things.
Right.
Some ideas reveal themselves to you, and some
Yeah.
you have to
Dig a little
work at.
deeper. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think the real gems are the ones that just kind of show up and say, "Here I am." So when I'm lucky, that happens with guitar.
Yep.
Um, but also, the studio has become a big instrument as well. There might be some
Right.
some other instrument or some sound in the computer that I find inspiring that ends up being the seed for an idea. But in my last record, well, my last kind of traditional record, so to speak, it was called Affirmation Day.
Right.
I wrote that album in an art incubator in Lithuania, where I decided to sequester myself for a month,
Dang.
because it had gotten kind of just to the degree where I was just touring a lot, and I was working in other musical facets, and it kind of just become a job. And I said to myself,
Ah. Yeah.
I need to go and rediscover my passion
Hmm.
somewhere far away from anywhere that I'm familiar with. So I went to Lithuania, which was a country that I had grown an affinity for a couple years prior.
Hmm.
That I had been there for an art project. So I went there with the intent to come back with a full album worth of songs that I could play just on my acoustic guitar. Because in
Right.
the studio, like you said, I build these productions, and
Right.
I love things to sound thick and lush, and I love things to have a lot of things going on that are interesting to the ear,
Right.
in
Yeah.
the sense of listening to a record. But this record, I really wanted to make it feasible to play from start to finish on an acoustic guitar, and
Right.
have the songs be able to really stand on their own as
Right.
just these acoustic songs. So, and that in itself was an interesting feat, because at the time I hadn't written a song in a long time,
Okay.
and I was concerned if I was going to be able to write, and
Yeah.
what I was going to write about and things like that. But when I got there, it actually, it's just like any muscle. It's like going to the gym and
It's
and
true.
building up that muscle that is there, but you haven't worked it out for a while. So within 5 days of being there, I really found this groove, and then it got to the point where I was writing a song a day, which
Awesome.
is very rare for me. But
Yeah.
I found that these retreats, and actually setting aside time to say, okay, I'm just going to be creative at this time,
Right.
and I'm going to block out everything else in my musical world. When it comes to administrative tasks and business and things like that, we're
Yeah.
not going to think about that. We're going to think about, I love playing music,
Right.
and I am going to take this chunk of time to play music and to write music, and that has proved to be a really good process for me, and probably one that I'll continue to use.
Awesome. I love that. Just kind of escaping and just taking the time. A lot of people don't have a month to spend, but it's nice when are given that. But even a few days, you can do a short little thing to just get away and just see kind of where the creativity takes you. That's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, with all the AI going on these days, I was just curious. You're a young guy. Do you use any AI as far as your recording or songwriting or lyrics? Or I'm just curious.
That is. it's funny you should bring that up because since I got on the road, I just got back from the NAMM show out in
Oh yeah.
Anaheim, which is a big, huge music convention I've gone to for years and years. But a lot of the discussions that I was having with people there were about AI and how they're implementing it and their opinions on it because
Yeah.
it's a very polarizing subject
Right.
and it's such a new thing um, that we as musicians need to decide how we're going to use it. I mean, it's here, so
Right.
it's a tool that we can use, but at what cost is the question. So when it comes to things like AI, the thing that I've been using lately, or I wouldn't say using, but exploring, is
Hmm.
a an app called Suno, which you
Okay.
may have heard of.
Yeah.
And it's, you can basically, you can hum a little jingle into it or sing a little melody or give it a couple lyrics and it will
Yeah.
spit out a fully finished, polished production for you.
That's awesome.
And it's both very inspiring and very scary
Right.
because, anytime something like this happens in the music industry, it was like it's always a threat to, is this going to make me irrelevant?
Yeah.
Because there's like, I was talking to actually a friend of mine that I used to work with, had the honor of working with, the previous drummer of Nine Nails, Jerome Dillon,
Oh,
and
nice.
I texted him on this trip and I said, hey, what do you think about this Suno thing? And he sent me back a short novel about it, and basically what he was saying is, he was around in the 80s when drum machines came out and when MIDI started happening and when these synthesizers could all of a sudden emulate an instrument
Right.
that somebody spent their entire life perfecting.
Right.
And so every time that's happened, there's been this threat of, am I going to still be relevant now that a machine can do something better than I can do it as a
Yeah.
human being?
Yeah.
And
In a
he
split
kind of
second.
gave me hope. Yeah, he kind of gave me hope in the sense of, throughout all of those times in history, it's always come back to the human being doing the
Mhm.
job, or it's always, the relevance of the human has never ceased to be part of the equation.
Right.
These can be used as tools, but you, as a musician, as an artist, you use them as part of your color palette. You
Yeah.
don't, they don't become something that completely takes over. Now AI is a little bit different in the sense of, just the nature of what it is. I mean, it's such a potent thing. It's like the advent of the internet.
Right.
It's such a
Yeah.
big thing, a big
Right.
technology, that it is going to change a lot of things. But so when it comes to how I'm going to decide to use the AI, is, I will admit, I put a lot of ideas, a lot of like little sound recordings from my
Yeah.
phone
Right.
through this Suno app, just to see what it would spit
Yeah.
out. And the one thing that I learned is, it will it will tell you, by what it spits out, it will kind of give you a sense of if the idea is good.
Oh,
If it, based on what it spits out, it'll say, it kind of gives me a sense of like, okay, this is a good song
okay.
because of the way that it deciphered the information and it
Yeah.
gave me this production. I can tell this is a good song. Now I will probably use it for little idea development things, like coming up with vocal melodies or something. Like,
Sure.
because like I was saying, sometimes these guitar ideas, if I'm lucky, they show up with a vocal melody,
Yep.
and if I'm not, then I have to chip away at the vocal
Yeah.
melody.
Yeah.
One thing that I will say Suno is kind of interesting for me so far is getting my gears turning in a way of starting to think about vocal melodies in a different way and think about rhythmic pacing and things like
Like
that.
that.
So to me, it's a little inspiration tool, and
Okay.
that's about the extent that I will probably use it. But it does not compute some very human elements. There's certain things about it that it
Yeah.
can't do what a human can do, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And I think it's probably, you know, in about a year, it's probably going to be able to do those things. But there are some, you know, some more kind of esoteric, strange ideas that I've fed it, and it's basically said, I don't know what to do with. So
So you're
so
ahead
it's a
of it
really
there.
interesting time. It's a really interesting time to be a musician, and be dealing with these technologies that are, so robust and so groundbreaking. And it'll be interesting to see the direction that AI is gonna take music. And I hope that, you know, I think all of us musicians hope that it stays a tool and doesn't necessarily overtake the human element of what makes music so special.
Well, the good thing is that AI can't come to a concert hall and perform it live, at least today. So we got that.
Correct. We do
We got
have
that.
we do have safety in the live realm. I think people are always going to want to see live music,
Yeah,
and I thank God for that, because
absolutely.
I do think that that is going to probably remain, you know, just how it is, hopefully.
Good stuff, man. So, what advice do you have for up and coming songwriters, just young and old, whether they're writing or touring or starting to tour or whatever? Just what are your thoughts to help out the community?
Well, I mean, from my experience, I would say, the best thing that I've always my creed has always been to remain authentic to myself as I can as an artist, and to, um, as Rick Rubin would say, he's a great
Yeah,
kind of sounding board for this
sure
type
is.
of question. Is the audience comes last. You know, make something that you love,
Right,
and, you know, don't think about how other people are going to perceive it. Make something that excites you, and
right.
through that excitement, other people are going to resonate with it. And
Absolutely.
you're actually doing a service to the audience by putting them last. Now, I am paraphrasing
No,
Rick Rubin
yeah.
here, but I think it's great. I think that's great advice, and that's kind of something that I've lived by, my entire music career. So I would just say, stay authentic to yourself. Work out your problems in life through making art about them, and it's going to reward you in ways that, you know, would probably, um, take a lot of therapy sessions otherwise.
So it's cheaper in the long run. So then you have an excuse
It's
to buy new
cheaper. It's
gear.
more fun. You get a reward at the end of it that you get
Yeah,
to share with the world. You
yeah.
know. So yeah, alchemize your life through music.
Good advice, man. So what's next? You're on this tour for a little while. What are you
Yeah.
doing after that?
Um, well, I am going to be going to Ecuador in March for a project with, an art group that I'm part of, a group called Take Me to the River, and it's actually mostly visual artists from all
Okay.
around the world. And every couple of years, we go and we find a cool spot in the world to go and create art, and then we do an exhibition and usually a community outreach type of event, something charitable for the community. So we have a project in Ecuador in March, which is pretty exciting. I always call myself the musical outcast of that group because
Okay.
I think there's one other musician in the group, and probably 30 members in the group, but mostly visual artists.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be, you know, thinking about what I'm going to be performing in Ecuador, and
Awesome.
how that's going to manifest. And then I am also in the process of writing a new album right now, which is,
Great.
pretty exciting. And I'm working with some fantastic musicians that
Awesome.
I'm really honored to have in my corner. So a bit more branching out in the sense of, bringing other people into the studio, and
Right.
utilizing other people's talents and their kind of essence on this new album that I'm very excited about.
It's amazing how, as a solo performer, when you collaborate with others, it can get a lot bigger than just yourself. You know what I mean? It's just
Absolutely.
the sum of the parts is always way bigger than just four people or whatever. It's just really cool how that works.
Yeah, that's actually so. I'm excited to play with Ryan David Green on these Guitar Dreams shows because we're gonna do a few songs together at
Yeah,
the end of each
good,
show,
good.
and as in terms of my fingerstyle stuff, it's been a while since I've collaborated with anybody
Yeah.
in that capacity. So we have a rehearsal session before the first show that I'm really excited for, and I'm excited to see what how we kind of bounce ideas off of each other and
Yeah.
what that inspires. And I'm sure it'll be a rich and fun experience.
Well, great, man. I'm looking forward to the show on Saturday up here in Flagstaff on the
Yes, sir.
31st, just to confirm. And hopefully get to connect after the show. And Flagstaff's a great place, and we'll welcome you with open arms.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be excited to meet you in person, and yeah, we're looking forward to putting on an awesome show up there.
I know it will be. So, everybody, Jake Allen playing this Saturday at Coconino Center for the Arts. Check it out. I will be there. And Jake, thanks so much for your time, man.
Thank you, Steve.